The first film we're talking about is Ryan Coogler's new Stephen King-esque film Sinners, starring Michael B. Jordan, not just as one role, but as two. He plays two somewhat criminal twins who are starting a new dance hall as they have just returned from Chicago to the Mississippi Delta. However, as they try to establish themselves as credible businessmen, strange things occur. Demons in the night crawl out with their very sharp teeth. Spoilers, there are vampires in this movie. Now, this film is not only just a cinematic masterpiece. It looks beautiful, the acting is incredible, the action and horror are incredible, but it also has one of the greatest soundtracks of modern times. It utilizes music in a way that I haven't seen in a very long time and does it in a very effective way. It is a great demonstration of cultural music, of blues music, of what then becomes rock and roll. Everything sort of generates. It has a brilliant, brilliant soundtrack. And so it also deals with horror really, really nicely. It's a far better vampire film than some we've previously talked about on this program. But I'm going to pass it off to my capable co-host and ask him, Reuben, what did you think of Sinners?
Well, I'm concerned that I've been downgraded from esteemed to merely capable, but I really like this film. However, I think that over the course of this review, what will become apparent is that I think that there is so much in this film that I also haven't managed to appreciate, and I think it might be even better than I already think it is. So I went into this knowing only really that at some point vampires were going to turn up. I had studiously avoided watching any trailers, and I'd done quite a good job of, sort of staying away from reviews. So I have to say, I was really surprised by the story of this, because actually what it's about is it's about the magical, transportive power of music. The film has this kind of pre-title sequence which basically sets out the lore of the land, which is that basically within every kind of culture, every society, there are these genius musicians, and through their work they have the ability to essentially transgress the laws of time and space, and they can summon spirits from the past, present and future. And therefore these people, whilst their music is extraordinary, it is also in itself a form of magic. And we then are introduced to our central protagonist, Sammy, who is a fantastically talented blues musician, but he's confronted by his preacher father, who tells him that he needs to abandon his music and give up his guitar because it's dangerous and he is cavorting with sinners. And little does he know just how right he is, because the film then takes us back 24 hours earlier to, as Jake mentioned in the introduction, these mob brothers who've just come in from Chicago, Smoke and Stack, both played phenomenally by Michael B. Jordan, who are setting up a juke joint, and they want Sammy, their younger cousin, to play at that night's grand opening. I just thought that this was crazy, honestly. It takes such a swerve about a third of the way through into suddenly being a campy horror film, and I have to say that delighted me, because I did find the first sort of 40 minutes, while they're very, very good, it's quite a straight, quite restrained in many ways, kind of period drama. And the moment that we get the introduction of the vampire characters, led, I think, by an amazing Jack O'Connell, that's when it all shifted into gear. There is literally, they pan up to the moon, Ludwig Göransson plays a fun little campy guitar riff, the synthesizers kick in, and you're just like, okay, oh sorry, it's Thriller. Suddenly, it's Thriller. It's just great. It's really, really good fun. And from then, I was just completely swept up in it. As you said, Jake, I just thought the soundtrack, both the live performances that we're seeing and Ludwig Göransson's score, it's produced by his wife as well. It's really, really something special. This is definitely going to win Best Original Score next year, right? It has to.
Oh, it absolutely has to. It has an electric quality to it. There's a brilliant sequence, and what really solidified the movie for me, which some I could see might find a bit goofy.
I know exactly what you're going to say. For me, this is the moment that I sort of sat back and went, Oh, this Ryan Coogler really knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing, because it is quite straight to begin with, but I quite like it. It's very well done, the beginning. All the parts are very, very well played. Everyone feels very weathered, and they exist in this world. No one puts a foot wrong in how they present their characters. I think it's very, very neat acting, very, very neat direction. Everyone just seems basking in this Mississippi sun. It just looks great. Everything looks great. The costumes are great. There's a sequence where Sammy, Preacher Boy Sammy, starts playing properly, and it just encapsulates the whole audience. And then it has a very surreal moment where lots of characters come in from different time periods, and then different aspects of music. You know, electric guitar comes in, DJ decks, hip hop, people dancing not only in more traditional African styles, but all the way up to modern dance that is popularized by African Americans. It was spectacular. Some people might say, oh, that's a bit odd, but to me, I think this is real talented filmmaking, because you're pushing the boundaries. It doesn't have to be so bland in its representation where, oh, we can interpret that this will lead to it. Why not show it? It's a visual art, and they show it so nicely. What else about this film that really gets me is that it reminds me a lot of my favorite book, which is Salem's Lot, which I think there must be some inspiration for the vampire characters, because there's this idea of community, of this sort of spanning plague that sort of unites everyone under this sort of hypnotic, trance-like presentation as vampires. Jack O'Connell plays the Kurt Barlow-esque character, someone with a very sweet voice, and is able to lure people in. It's the best way I've seen vampirism presented in literature, but this is a really nice way of demonstrating it in person. The way they sort of entrap people through the beauty of their own song. It's not only a meditation on cultural music, but it's also a meditation on racism and the effects of white supremacy and the idea of appropriation and all this stuff as part of one community, the idea of religious extremism as well. And it just layers it all so nicely in this quite palatable package, because Reuben's right, it does become kind of like a very fun B-movie horror, but with stakes, because they've done such a good job in developing all the characters and all the relationships. You know exactly what people want and who they are, especially Michael B. Jordan, who has the task of juggling two very distinct twin brothers who have their own desires and own wants, and yet are so easily identifiable.
Can we take a moment also to appreciate how much better Michael B. Jordan is at playing two different characters in the same scene than Robert De Niro in Alto Nights, where you never really believe, A, that there's any reason he should be playing both of them, or that they've ever set foot in the same room. I thought the interplay between them is very, very good. He has fantastic chemistry with himself.
Yes, it's quite marvellous. Some may say that might be a fault of massive Hollywood ego, but who knows? It works very well for this film. There seems to be a lot of trust between director and actor here, which is really nice. Of course, they've worked together extensively, and it really shows. It really does show. It really works. It's very, very neatly done. I just really think that it does capture a bit of what some recent vampire movies, Nosferatu, have been missing, which is the fear and the allure of a vampire. Nosferatu is quite obviously repulsive and repugnant in his presentation, but at no point did I ever feel like I would be entranced by this mystical being. Jack O'Connell is always presented as quite foul, and he's always covered in blood, and is able to entice and attract far more conventionally beautiful people. But, you know, he's always presented as quite ugly of soul, and, you know, his first victims are Ku Klux Klan members, so we're not supposed to love them. But it's a much better way at showing the power of the vampire. It's sort of what I've been missing in sort of recent horror cinema with their presentation of vampires, because it's not overly unique. As I said, it reminds me a lot of Salem's Lot, but if you're going to adapt something, why not adapt the best way of presenting it? And it just really works. And I mean, the songs they sing, because they come together, these three vampires come to the door of the juke joint, and they sing these songs, and there's a moment where Hailee Steinfeld goes out to see them, and they're just so beautifully well mixed, beautifully arranged music that, you know, you can really understand that it's quite an interesting take that you've got the beauty of the cultural blues music of the main characters, but then you're not shying away from other beautiful music of this different culture.
Oh, but it's so creepy as well, right? Like that sequence where they first come to the door and like as one, like all of their emotions are completely matching. Like they are a hive mind, and you can see that just from the second that they pluck up their instruments.
I liked the fact that they made them so as equally as good almost, but in a way that feels more sanitized than the raw music that is presented by Preacher Boy Sammy, our de facto main character, sort of the way we're seeing the world. And so, yeah, I think this is my favorite film of the year so far. I'd be as bold to say that because it was just such a ride. And a bit like what I was saying about Drop last week, how it sort of changes into a different type of film. Reuben's right, it does sort of take different turns. And I love every turn it takes. Every time you feel like it's becoming a bit too safe, it always tries something else. And sometimes even when you think, oh, it's all over now, still not. There's a little bit of tension brewing or an extra bit of flourish to put in there just to enrich the entire experience. I always find it hard to talk about films I absolutely love because all I want to say is I absolutely freaking loved it. I would go watch it again because, as Reuben says, there's so much, it's so packed, but it never feels overstuffed. It just feels like you're having a great 5-course meal that you want to cherish all the little bits, but you are just, no, I have to be in the now and experience it all as just one thing right now, and then go back and try and think, oh, that was nice when I ate that, and that was nice, and and see if you can go back and have it again. So yeah, it's incredible. It absolutely is incredible. I couldn't put a fault wrong. I couldn't really fault it.
Well, it's interesting because the place where I think it goes boldly and elevates itself, and I hate to bash on Nosferatu, but I think that was a film which was incredibly, incredibly safe. I think that it did absolutely nothing new. It was the vampire story that we had heard and read and watched many, many, many times over. Done again. Done very well, but just done again. And for me, Sinners is very bold because it goes, okay, but actually we're going to use vampires to talk about race. We're going to use vampires to talk about segregation in the Deep South. And we're going to use that as an angle from which to go, okay, so the whole thing about vampires is that they stand on the threshold of a room and they can't come in unless invited in. And the film brilliantly taps into that as a visual metaphor for the fact that at this point in America, there are explicit white-only spaces. There are literally entrances that African-American characters in this film can't walk through because it is not divined to be their place. And I think that instantly it suddenly feels like the film is engaging with real-world issues and real-world stakes in a way that just enriches it and adds so many layers to the story. It becomes almost a kind of parable. And therefore, in many ways, they're not evil, I don't think, in this film. Because actually what the vampires want is to build a new, better world free of discrimination, free of segregation. They want to be free. The whole film is about freedom, but it comes at it through this supernatural lens. And I think that's inspired. I think that's a terrific way of taking vampires, which we have seen so many times, and casting them in, if you'll pardon the pun, an entirely new light. So I was really impressed by that. And I just think that's one of the areas that I will understand even better when I watch this a second time around, is I will be so interested in its racial politics and the way that it mines that metaphor.
Yeah, I think Reuben has a really good point there, that it does deal with that idea that the vampires do have this quite alluring sense to them, But the stakes are high because can you really build a better community without soul? And that's the idea of this film. It's got great soul, not only in soul music, in its representation of some people's strong religious beliefs. It not only deals with Christianity, but also far more traditional African magic that comes to play in the film as well. And I think it's really neat. It's just really bold. And you're right, but soul is such a great thing. It's such a great definition of this film. And Reuben's comments really unlocked it for me that, yes, that's all it's about. Is it worth your soul to give up? No, you have to stand for what you believe in.
I have one criticism, which is that I think that they roll the credits too early. Because this film has a very, very extended post-credits sequence to the extent that it should just be before the credits. And the reason I say that is because in the screening that I went to, some people left the moment that Ryan Coogler's name came up, and they missed a lot of story. Like, there's a solid 7 minutes of more story after Ryan Coogler's credit appears. So if you go and watch this, make sure that you stay all the way until the end. And indeed, there is a post-credit sting as well. It's not a Marvel film, but this is a film with a lot of story to tell. And frankly, it would be a sin to miss any of it.